Good afternoon, everybody. Getting ready for episode 2 of the Will Chamberlain Show. It's weird, being self-referential on that matter, but we are beginning. Just very shortly, we should have things up on Apple Podcasts too. So when we do that, I'll certainly be asking you guys to subscribe. But in the interim, I'm glad you're here. There's plenty to talk about today. We've got Cuomo resigning. We've got the infrastructure bill passing the Senate. And we've got this new lawsuit against OAN and Newsmax about the Dominion stuff, about the election rigging allegations. And so I'm going to talk through all three. I think that should take us through about 40 minutes. And as I explained yesterday, the kind of basic structure that I'm looking at for this is I'm going to try and do about 40 minutes of straight content, not doing too much in the way of analyzing your comments and just trying to kind of go through it, because this is supposed to be a podcast. This is supposed to be something that you can listen to when you are, working out or whatever. But then the last 20 minutes then are kind of focused on viewer interaction, because I want this to be something that, like Periscope was in the good old days, like every good live stream is a place where that you get a chance to interact and participate in the performance. And so we're going to do that Monday through Friday. It's possible we may move this earlier than 2 p.m. I've had multiple people ask me to see if I can do it. Might be tricky. But the basic concept here is pretty straightforward. With that being said, let's get right into it. Andrew Cuomo has resigned. That's the news of the day. It's very clearly the news of the day. He is stepping down after an investigation which found that he sexually harassed 11 women. We now figured out exactly what it takes to get rid of the governor of a Democrat governor. Indeed, they have to actually sexually harass someone. And be proven to do so in an investigation. It's not nearly enough for there to be allegations about it. The resignation, I think this is a pretty decent analysis from the New York Times, which I don't like saying, but it's true that he still faces serious legal threats. Probably not a huge amount of criminal threats, but certainly he's facing some potential civil litigation, especially from Lindsey Boylan, who was one of the first accusers. I don't know if you guys remember who Lindsey Boylan was, but she was a candidate for some Manhattan city office. And I think she was like Manhattan bureau president or something. But she worked in Cuomo's office and was one of the first people. She posted a Medium post, my story of working with Governor Cuomo, that kind of kicked all this off and launched this. And, obviously also Janice Dean is vindicated. Janice Dean, the person at the Fox personality whose parents sadly lost their lives in the very early stages of COVID. Is there really no sound? Okay, multiple people saying no sound. That's weird. Hold on. What's going on? Camera, mic, audio, default. Oh, wow, here's the mic. Got it. I am so sorry. You have sound. People should have better sound now. Very strange. All right, everybody. Okay, there are multiple sound for me to keep skipping. Okay, now, all right, should be better. Anyway, so thank you guys and for mentioning that. Janice Dean is obviously vindicated. Her grandparents died of COVID. Her parents died of COVID in the early stages due to Cuomo's malfeasance with the nursing home. So it's good to see her vindicated. A lot of other kind of good takes here. Ash Short. Saying that, from a 7-figure book deal and a talk for a presidential campaign, we're now to a resignation. It's a really big downfall, Avenatti level. Bethany Mandel and others, she's not the only person, but I like this, the fact that I think I saw Buck Sexton predicted this as well, that Cuomo's going to Northam this, and that's what I tell him to do. The news cycle moves so fast that he can ride it out with few New Yorkers actually noticing. That was the original prediction. And some of you might not know this. Unmute. I muted myself again randomly for no good reason. Back in 2019, I think it was, or maybe 2020, but it was the Northam scandal. If you guys remember Ralph Northam, I remember everybody at the time was sure he was going to resign. And as I was one of the people who was like, hey, I don't think he will. I think he doesn't have to, because they have to impeach him. He's a governor. He doesn't have any incentive to resign. And unless they can actually put together an impeachment, I don't think he's going anywhere. And I actually made I made like $1,000, I think. Maybe like less than that, 500, but I actually put my records of predicted bets on the fact that I was betting that Ralph Northam would stay in office, and people forgot, and at that time I was like, okay, I just think the conventional wisdom was wrong here. conventional wisdom was a little more inclined towards he's not going to resign. I didn't make any bets because I was like, I mean, I could see it here. I could see this going the wrong way. And and also the betting line was better. You know, back then they were saying that there was a 80% chance that Northam was going to resign, and the betting line reflected that. So I was like, well, that's easy money. I'm getting 4-1 odds. Here, the odds were something like 30% he would resign, and I was like, well, that's not a good enough bet, even if I think that's roughly about right. So, you know, surprising, I guess. I mean, ultimately, though, we found out that, you know, if you have a formal investigation proving you're a sexual harasser, that's going to lead you resigning. And the funny thing is, obviously, that's in some cosmic sense substantially less bad than his malfeasance with the nursing homes, right? If you think about the sheer number of people that are dead because of Andrew Cuomo's decisions, that can be directly traced to that. That's got to be worse than the sexual harassment, and yet it is the sexual harassment that only ultimately did him in. Yeah, I mean, you got to think that maybe this is something about the nature of the people who would ultimately be responsible for removing him, that they would have to take the blame too, if for the nursing home stuff, that they didn't want to shatter that image, but also that maybe they just have, it's the nature of the allegations. If you remember the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, going through with it, and going through the whole litany of things that Cuomo did and how appalling they were. It was like, I think in particular, it was very visceral for both the women in politics, men in politics, their staffs, everybody who would be involved in making the decision to impeach him or have influence on it would be themselves appalled by what Cuomo was doing. And because they would be appalled, it's like it became personal. And I think the fact that it was personal made it very easy for Democrats to kind of rally around the idea, no, we don't want this person in power. It's disgusting. This is exactly what we fight against. So a couple of decent questions I'll answer now. Twixie asks whether this is a resignation in exchange for no criminal charges. And I think that's probably not what's going on here. I think this is more a situation where Carl Heastie, who is the New York State Assembly head, let's see if I can quickly. He's the guy who actually ultimately had the power here, the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, Carl Heastie. And he's the guy who had the influence here about whether or not this guy would resign. And I think he made a statement last week saying they were going to impeach him. And I think they basically just told Cuomo, they're like, you're going to be impeached, so up to you. But like, we've got the votes, we're impeaching you. And we don't really care what you do, so resign or don't. So that's what I think. Let's see. So Brand Edwards asked, does this mean no investigation of the nursing homes? I expect there won't be. I think that the Democrats really do want that to be shuffled under the rug. There's other interesting takes out there. Mike Davis at IAP wrote a decent piece on why it's finally time to cancel Chris Cuomo. I'm all for that. We're reminded of the fact that Cuomo received an Emmy Award. Also funny. Interesting. Interesting comment, Dave. And then, this is the next topic. So Cuomo resigned, but that's pretty fascinating. And I think a little bit surprising, but certainly well-deserved for everything he had done. And I'm glad to see him gone. Whether this is actually a huge win for Republicans, I don't think so. I mean, at the end, Democrats this is ultimately an intramural Democrat dispute in New York between, kind of the progressive wing and the more establishment people. I think the new governor is a very establishment person. And that's going to be a theme actually today. Like, we're going to talk about infrastructure, not right away, but it's the third thing on the list of things I want to talk about. And I think the big thing with the infrastructure bill debate is that, and that I haven't seen any real right-leaning outlets confront, is sort of what's actually at stake and what the internal dynamics of that debate are. I've been looking at it, and everybody's saying that the Republicans are traitors, and I'm not persuaded by that at all. That because I don't think it really grapples with exactly what is the problem. Why are we passing a bipartisan infrastructure bill in the first place? Did McConnell lose his mind? And I don't think that's the case. But before we talk more further about infrastructure, I do want to talk about this lawsuit. This is actually fairly big news. I didn't see too many people cover it. Maybe not the most favorable to our side, but hey. Dominion Voting Systems has sued OAN and Newsmax, saying they defamed the voting machine company by spreading conspiracy theories that rigged the 2020 election. Now, this has been coming. It's not a surprise. There have been, I think back in January or February, we had cease and desist letters that were sent by Dominion's lawyers to OAN, Newsmax, Fox News, etc. And I think they sued Fox News a while back, if I'm not mistaken. But now we have a formal lawsuit. That's today, August 10th, 2021. We have a formal lawsuit, and I actually have read through both of the lawsuits here. So we have this one. Hold on, let me move this over so this is a little bit less ugly. Well, anyway, I don't know how to fix this viewpoint. So instead, we'll look at the Newsmax one. But these are very long complaints. That's the first thing you have to notice. So to kind of do some legal analysis here, these are not trivial lawsuits. We're talking page 166. This is just a complaint. So you can tell that the lawyers have been working hard. And another key point, we're going to talk a little bit about both of these. This is there's a difference between the two lawsuits. One is the one against Newsmax is in Delaware. The one against Dominion, or I'm sorry, the one against Fox News was also in Delaware. But the one against OAN is, hold on. Well, I've lost it already, so my bad on that front. The one against OAN is actually a federal lawsuit in Washington, D.C. And the reason for that is, I think, ultimately jurisdictional, because Newsmax is a Delaware corporation, and so is Dominion. One would assume they would sue each other. They have to sue each other in Delaware. But when it comes to OAN, which I think may not be a Delaware corporation, they can go ahead and sue them in Washington, D.C., because they're also suing Chanel Ryan and Christina Bobb, who are OAN correspondents. Basically, the argument being that they all slandered Dominion and destroyed its business. That's not I want to talk about this because it's a really big. These are big lawsuits, and kind of one of the things I want to hit on is I'm really worried about Newsmax and OAN. I hope that they're ready for serious litigation or hiring serious lawyers, because I'm a lawyer and I know who they've hired. So this is towards the end. Whenever you see a lawsuit filed, the first thing I want to do is kind of figure out who are the lawyers involved and are they competent? And the answer here is yes. I knew that Claire Locke was involved. Claire Locke is a plaintiff side defamation firm. As you can see, they're a boutique law firm dedicated to defamation, and they're not very big, right? We're talking maybe 10 lawyers. I think, hold on. Stop that. We're talking maybe 10 lawyers here. And the difference here is, if you actually go to the complaint, it used to be just Claire Locke. Now also this other firm, Sussman Godfrey, is on the complaint too. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, wow. Because Sussman is the #1 litigation firm in the country, right? I don't know if you can read. This is pretty small, but it says, quote, here from their own website, named Vault's #1 litigation boutique in America every year since the ward's inception. When I was practicing law and trying to get a job, when I was looking at litigation, that was Sussman was one of those firms that people would want to work for. And the lead lawyer, his name is Justin Nelson. He's on this case. He's a guy who was a clerk for Sandra Day O'Connor on the Supreme Court, impeccable credentials, Yale BA, Columbia JD, actually represented the state, oddly enough, represented pro bono in the 2020 election. He represented the Arizona Secretary of State and the Wisconsin governor. And they won, right? They represented against the Trump team. So this is a guy with a lot of experience with this election-related litigation already, a very experienced lawyer and a top-level guy. And the other thing to be scared about Sussman is notorious for fee-sharing arrangements. So these are not the kind of lawyers, when you hire Sussman, they're not the kind of lawyers that you just pay them an hourly rate and that's all. They actually want a share of your winnings, and that's why they're a boutique that handles plaintiff side litigation. So they're probably in here with a contingency fee, which means they think they're going to win a bunch of money from Fox and Newsmax and OAN over the election rigging stuff, which is really scary. I think in the end, that this is one of many lawsuits. I'm not pleased about it, but we got to know about it. There's a reason I was really, really careful about what I was saying about the election, especially didn't entertain the Dominion theories. It's not just that I didn't think that was right, and I thought that a lot of those arguments were kind of false. But the second thing is it's really expensive to say things that aren't true about $1 billion company, and in a way that really does hurt their business. This isn't Coke, where everybody's just going to keep drinking Coke. This is an election machines company whose entire business revolves around the fact that people would trust in their machines. And so if you undermine the trust in their machines, you risk really doing a huge amount of damage to them. And so I think I'm kind of scared about these, and I hope that OAN and Newsmax hire really competent counsel to get ready to defend, because I know for a fact that you have Claire Locke and they brought on Sussman Godfrey to write these 200-page complaints. They have a serious resources, seriously talented lawyers suing these companies, Newsmax and OAN, TV channels we watch for a big money. And I mean, it's not like they're not like Fox News. Again, also, these are not the most like completely independently wealthy, like robust businesses. Like Newsmax is losing money hand over fist. So I'm very, very concerned about what's going to happen to these guys. And I hope they hire good counsel to get ready to defend these lawsuits. So that's part two. Part three is the infrastructure bill. So this is what I saw. We have, the Senate passing a bipartisan infrastructure bill on Tuesday. And, here's the thing about this. I was reading all sorts of people saying it was like a betrayal. But I was like trying to understand exactly why. Like, I get it's a big spending bill and we spend a lot of money, but we spent a lot of money under Trump too. And so I wanted to kind of understand like why, Trump said we were being suckers for passing it. Okay, but why? Like, I want to hear a substantive explanation. Like, what is it that's so bad about passing this? What were our options? And what's the actual problem? And I mean, there are things in here that are really dumb. I mean, I think, for example, Amtrak's getting $66 billion in new funding, and this adjusted mandate thing is a real problem. Quoting from the New York Times, the bill includes new language that would change Amtrak's goal to, quote, meet the inner city passenger rail needs of the United States, rather than achieving, quote, a performance level sufficient to justify expending public money. So it's changing to like, well, we're here to just connect people and we don't care if Amtrak is profitable or efficient or anything. And instead, we're just here to connect people. Maybe that means they'll upgrade the infrastructure, which would be helpful. But it also means that Amtrak becomes this incredibly cushy, massive pit of money, although that's sort of what it's been already. So again, not ideal, like probably not what I would have liked to see money spent on, but okay. But what are our options? Did we have the option to not pass this? And what happens if we didn't? And here's where I think, people have kind of missed the boat. And I want to talk in detail about this. So here's an article from the First, quote, Joe Manchin says that he can't really guarantee anybody that the Democratic-led reconciliation package will pass the Senate. And AOC, I think 2 days ago, they're slamming moderate Democrats' concerns about their reconciliation bill, saying bipartisan doesn't mean it's good. And so we got to understand what's going on here, right? This is what's, I think, missing from the whole debate about the infrastructure bill. The House has passed this ridiculously super left-wing like bill that includes like amnesty, includes funding for all sorts of stuff. The entire point of this $3.5 trillion bill is to get it through reconciliation, meaning we don't need any Republican votes. It is like, it would be terrible for us. Let's just assume that. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. I think it includes amnesty. In fact, the Heritage White Paper said something about it. And then on the other side, we have the Senate, who passed a bipartisan bill that was relatively smaller, 1.2 trillion, a lot more focused on stuff, broadly more focused on stuff Republicans agree with, funding bridges, roads, also funded things that we don't like, probably Amtrak, electric vehicle charging. And so it's unclear how good or bad that is, probably not ideal, but we passed it in the Senate. So why did we do that? Like, why did McConnell read all this? Why do we have 19 Republican senators? I think I kind of understand why. And it has to do with this this fight between Manchin and maybe Sinema, I don't know, but Manchin certainly, and like the progressives in the House. Basically, I don't think Joe Manchin's really down with the reconciliation bill. I certainly don't think he's down with amnesty. I think he's a moderate guy. I don't like the fact that we're constantly worrying about appeasing him, but at the same point, like he could have gone the other way on the filibuster. You guys remember there was the For the People Act that was being thrown about and being talked about being passed in the last couple months, and we didn't have the votes alone to stop it, right? Because basically Democrats wanted to end the filibuster so they could pass the For the People Act, which would have completely been a takeover of our elections. And the consequences of losing that would have been like, oh, we just lose. Like basically Democrats pass a law that, completely eviscerates election integrity and makes it so they can win every election everywhere and whenever they want and overrides state laws on this. So, okay. Joe Manchin said no to that. He could have just gone along with it, but he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And ultimately the 4 Other People Act is dead. And also any attempts to get rid of the filibuster are dead. Thank God, right? Like that's a big, big benefit. But now we're dealing with something different. This isn't what the Democrats are trying to do with this reconciliation bill. They're not trying to get rid of the filibuster. They're trying to use a process that's been used before to get a massive number, every Democrat priority they can in with 50 votes without getting rid of the filibuster. And that's scary because Manchin has previously said, well, I might go along with something like that. And so, but he's also saying he can't, quote, again, he can't guarantee that the Democrat-led reconciliation package will pass the Senate. And what AOC is trying to do is sort of play hardball in her own right. She says, quote, let's see if I can increase the size here. If there is not a reconciliation bill in the House and the Senate does not pass a reconciliation bill, we will uphold our end of the bargain and not pass the bipartisan bill until we get all these investments in. So she's trying, like, again, Manchin's trying to be like, I don't think I really want to pass this $1 trillion bill, but I'm happy. I like our bipartisan bill that's 1.2 and it's good. And AOC is like, well, you're not getting your $1.2 trillion bill unless you agree to pass my bipartisan bill. So basically AOC is trying to is like really worried about getting this infrastructure bill, really worried that Manchin will say no, trying to threaten him. And who knows if that'll work. But the question then is, what's the best position for Republicans to be in given this? And here's the problem. I think this is the thing that Republicans aren't grappling with. If Republicans don't make a good faith effort with Manchin to like meet him halfway on infrastructure, then why doesn't he just go to AOC and agree and they just screw us and pass a reconciliation bill and we just lose everything? I mean, this is sort of, I think people aren't really talking about the downside here. Like, what's the downside if we don't work with like the sort of the 2 moderate Democrats on and get something through the Senate with them? Then we risk just losing everything because they're like, well, if I want to, get anything from my constituents, I need to go with AOC. So somebody says, so the GOP gave up their leverage in the hopes that Manchin doesn't act like a Democrat. Here's the thing. I don't think the GOP really had leverage by not passing anything. Like, again, it's Manchin who had the leverage over the GOP. This is what you got to understand. What leverage did the GOP have over Manchin other than saying he's a bad guy and being mean to him? Well, everybody thinks, everybody's mean to him. Manchin could go to the GOP and say, look, if you don't work with me on this, we're going to do reconciliation and you'll lose. I'm going to pass all the things you don't like anyway. You won't get what you want. And so if you don't work with me, we're screwed. On the other hand, Joe Manchin would prefer broadly to work with you guys on a bipartisan bill rather than to just pass AOC's bill outright. And so if you work with me, we can get something together. So when people talk about like how the GOP has leverage, we really didn't. We don't have that. People need to understand that we don't have that much leverage right now because we lost, right? We lost. We maybe like what everything else, like we are in a position where we don't have the Senate majority. So we're at the mercy. We're trying to leverage Senate rules and like norms and posturing to keep certain moderate Democrats from like outright screwing us. But like we don't have the kind of leverage people seem to think we have. We really don't. We're very much, as Roman Candle puts it, this is exactly right. Democrats have the White House and both branches of Congress. They're holding most of the cards. They're just not holding Manchin, but we don't hold Manchin either. And so I think ultimately what's happening here is there's this calculation going on because like you look at Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell's not like a government spending good guy. He's not really a big fan of massive infrastructure bills. He's not really a big fan of giving into Democrat priorities. He's not a fan of losing. And he's not incompetent and idiotic. You may not like him. He's not really one of us. I don't think of him as like a nationalist or a populist. But he's certainly not like a Democrat. And so if he's signing on to this and instructing his caucus to sign on this, there's a reason for it. And I don't feel like anybody's even tried to understand where McConnell et al. Are coming from. And my analysis is McConnell and the other Republicans have calculated that, getting agreement and working with Manchin and Sinema on a bipartisan bill is necessary to keep them from signing on to the reconciliation proposal, or significantly increases the probability that they won't sign on to the reconciliation proposal. And that's what I think is going on. That's, I think, the simplest explanation for why is this happening? Because otherwise, like, you go to Twitter and you just see like all sorts of stuff about people just disagreeing with this take entirely. Like, but very few people like think it's actually good. So let's see, top tweets on infrastructure. Let's go through this, right? In this infrastructure bill, less than 15% of it is actually for traditional infrastructure. Probably true. Like, somebody says, but then the question is like, is that actually good? I don't know. Is that true though? Roads and bridges, 110 billion, rail, 66, power grid, 65, broadband, 65, water and pipes. Who knows? I don't know. I don't really know what's in the bill. The fact that the Senate bill is a bigger deal than Cuomo resigning, I agree, but I think it also needs to be compared to the alternatives. Like, what are we risking here? And these are all friends. Like, it's like, I agree, I'm with all these friends, but this whole thing where we're like highlighting, how dare these 19 Republicans betray us? Like, I don't know that that's actually what's happening here, guys. And I'm not a fan. Trust me, I'm not a fan of McConnell. I'm not a fan of the moderate Democrats or the moderate Republicans. You're not talking to a guy who, thinks this is all a great idea. But you're also, it's like, what's our negotiating position? What's our alternatives here? Like, there's a reconciliation bill in the House that still stands some meaningful risk of passing the Senate. And if it getting 50 votes, some sort of reconciliation bill will pass. It always does, right? To get basic things funded. So what's that look like? How strong is Manchin's negotiating position? It's almost like what we're trying to do. I think what McConnell's trying to do is strengthen Manchin's negotiating position on the negotiations on the reconciliation, which would screw us. And so we want Manchin to be in a really strong position, saying, well, I already got all the infrastructure stuff I needed. I already got the roads and bridges. That's the stuff I wanted and cared about. Now, whatever this bullshit stuff that AOC and the rest of the squad want, I could ignore. So that's what I think is happening there, and I think everybody's missing that. I think that's a big one. And I don't want to sit here and think, be a McConnell shill, because I'm not, I think he's a competent guy, but I don't think he's on our side necessarily all the time. But there needs to be more depth to the analysis of people who are critical of this, merely than that it spends a lot of money. Because newsflash, the government's been spending like a drunken sailor for years. Like, since COVID, we've been going crazy, and that's driven by both sides. And moreover, like, you need to actually articulate some sort of impact to all that government spending. Like, yeah, there's inflation, sure, but and also compare it to the alternatives. Like, the question is, what happens if Senate Republicans don't agree to pass this and the Senate buries it in the filibuster? Like, what happens if we fight on infrastructure like this? If we refuse this bill? And I don't think anybody's the answer to that question is not nothing, that nothing happens, because clearly we're not in power. It'd be one thing if McConnell slowed a majority, but we don't. Somebody says, Matthew Cameron says, why is this even a discussion when we don't have the money? People are refusing to work. Stop borrowing from our kids. I think that this is just not how I would look at government spending generally. And it would apply equally to Trump, right? We got to remember, Trump, there was a lot of deficit spending under Trump. And so it's not that we're borrowing from our kids so much as that we're really just having the government like issue new money. Now, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of like government spending, especially when it's pointless. But at the same time, I don't think, I don't know how we reconcile the fact that if it's the end of the world now, it would have been the end of the world last year when we were in power and able to negotiate these things. Anyway, so it's half an hour. That's all I got in terms of content today. I was trying to figure, the infrastructure thing was really interesting just because I didn't really had an opinion on that before, and I was trying to figure it out. And I am not impressed by the arguments saying that Republicans are betraying their base by voting for this. I think the question is, what are their alternatives? So let's go to questions, and if you have some more, please go ahead and put them at the bottom. Also, please share, like, subscribe. Really quick promo. If you're on Periscope, you can hit the ... or I guess you're on Twitter. You can go to my page and hit subscribe and get the notifications when I go live. You can also subscribe on youtube.com/human events if you like it, and like on facebook.com/human events media. I appreciate that. We're have a podcast stream going very, very shortly. When we do that, I would absolutely ask you to subscribe and share the podcast, because we're going to try and build up the audience for that really quickly, and just continue to do this, because I enjoy doing it. I miss live streaming. It's one of the things I like doing most. I miss talking about the news, and so I intend to continue to do that on a regular basis. Let's see. That guy's being a dick. Sorry, this guy. So remember how wrong you were on the Derek Chauvin trial? Remember how wrong you were on the election and the recount? Why would anybody want to listen to you now? Aw, I'm sorry, David. Now, I'll admit, granted, I was wrong on the Derek Chauvin trial. Sometimes you make a prediction, it doesn't work out. I make a lot of legal predictions. When you say how wrong I was in the election, that one I actually looked very right on, oddly enough. My main claim on the election was not that we were, that everything was lost fair and square or whatever, but rather that we weren't going to prevail on our legal challenges. That argument was true. My other argument was we need to be ready to take an L, because the consequences of continuing fighting to the bitter end might be really, really bad. That also turned out to be true. January 6th was very bad for the movement. It would be a lot better if Donald Trump still had his account. So if you want to try and say that I was wrong in the election, I actually think I was vindicated in my analysis of the election. I was very hesitant to get involved to stop the steal stuff. I thought it was futile. And I thought I was really upset with the quality of the legal filings that were coming from the people who were pushing forward the election challenges. And now literally the entire point is that didn't get anywhere. Joe Biden is now president. Donald Trump doesn't have a Twitter account. There are a huge number of patriots who are sadly still incarcerated in DC jail. I think in general, our movement would be much better off if we had been in a position to simply and this is not talking about post-election audits. That's one thing to try and figure out what happened. But the sort of absolute faith that somehow we were still going to prevail in the election in the, post-November, after November 30 was terrible for us. It didn't do any good for us at all. And I think it's time to come to grips with that. Right. And that's not an apology for any of the shenanigans. I was the guy who filmed the poll watcher being kicked out of the Philadelphia poll watching station. That was a video that went super viral on election day. I think it was, launched it actually relaunched Stop the Steal into the atmosphere. Or that was actually me. I don't try and make too many egotistical claims, but I was the guy who kind of got that going. And it's just, I'm a lawyer, so I have professional judgment. And sometimes I get things wrong. I predicted Chauvin would be not guilty. That was a mistake in retrospect, sure. But I also am pretty sure that I predicted correctly that the legal challenges would not work, that Joe Biden would take office, that we needed to get ready for that eventuality and not fight a losing battle. So that was actually, I'm pretty sure that was right. So what else is there? We went over the Cuomo stuff. Roman Candle saying that I wish that Cuomo had been forced out for the nursing home stuff, but instead that they got Al Capone with tax evasion too. I'll take it. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Wander This World says that in Western New York, reactions are mixed about the Cuomo resignation. Understandable. I can it's hard to see that as a big win for conservatives in general. Let's look at some other comments. What were the results for the Chauvin mistrial he filed? I don't know that those motions have been resolved yet. The motions that Chauvin's lawyer filed. That might be something to talk about in a future podcast. Sal Mistretta says that fondling the New York State trooper did him in. That's the one accusation he and his attorney never refuted. She has way too much credibility. I think that's the one that certainly, I think, struck the hardest chord. Cynthia Hennig says, oh my God, the gas tax per mile affects everyone and financially bankrupts the poor and middle class. I don't think they're implementing it. I think they're studying it. And the question is going to be whether that exactly how that will work. Right. I don't know. Because right at the moment you're paying gas taxes through your purchase of gas. If that's going to end up being an increase in taxes, yes, that would be substantially worse. On the other hand, it could be a displacement where instead of hurting the middle class enormously, what you end up doing is hurting people who buy electric cars, right? it's conceivable to see a world where that's the case, where the electric car buyers are actually paying more. Because right now, if we go to full electric, then, or like it's wealthy people going to full electric, then they're not paying as much taxes as like middle class people. So I don't know which way that's going to go. I'd be reluctant to make a prediction on that without detailed analysis. So that's on the infrastructure bill. What else do we have? Somebody says, yeah, also Cynthia, and I'm happy to indulge. These are actually like good faith criticisms. Somebody says, this is dishonest when 21,800 pages haven't been read and there will be enormous taxes, inflation, more poor night taxes. I agree with you that, like it'd be better if people read the bill and understood what was going on. I don't really have a great idea of what's buried in these packages. I just assume that there's a reason. I think that people are missing that it's not enough to say that this bill is bad. People actually have to explain what the alternative is and what would happen in the world where we didn't pass it. So that's got to be a legit part of the analysis. Let's see. Nick says I should do a video about Shogun. I think I should. Yeah, it's been a while. Kind of maybe like an update video. That might be something I do for when I'm not able to do a live stream, because like I'm actually getting married in like 2.5 weeks. So when I'm not able to do a live stream, I might do like a pre-recorded video that goes through something like this in place of the live stream. That's kind of my idea for making sure that there's always content on like a Monday through Friday basis. Somebody says, yeah, Cynthia asks a question of why do I think it's okay to tax your son driving 45 miles one way or 90 miles per day? Well, as a constitutional matter, anybody, the taxing power is really broad. The question is, how exactly do we want to fund national infrastructure? And right now, there already are taxes on you for driving, right? There's a gas tax. It's a very large federal gas tax. The question is, how exactly, maybe that tax should be different, right? Like if we are going to tax driving, then maybe we tax it in a different way. Is it better to tax drivers by the mile they drive as opposed to by the gallon of gas they purchase? Does a tax that only focuses on miles driven regardless of your type of car, is that more fair and equitable to your son than is it just a straight gas tax? Like it's not an easy question. I don't actually know the answer to these things, and it would depend on exactly how the policy came out. Andrew Carey asks, does the House have the ability to change the bill and move it back to the Senate for a vote? Yeah, there will be a reconciliation process within the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Like if there's now a Senate bill, the House has to, this is like classic civics, right? The House has to pass a bill and then they have to agree on, reconcile any differences between them. So yes, is the answer. Dave Bear asks, how many weeks until the Democrats say all the destruction they have done over the last year requires a UBI remedy? I mean, they're basically already saying that. That's sort of the problem, the reconciliation bill. They really want to do everything in it, including straight amnesty for illegal immigrants. I don't want that. And I think that would be bad. Wander the World, where is this? Says, what about CNN helping raise $230,000 for the sitter pretending to be the mother for 3 kids? That is actually a good story. I did see that. I got kind of bogged down trying to understand this infrastructure thing because I felt that was more pressing. But yes, apparently CNN just lied to everybody and helped a woman fraudulently raise $230,000 for their GoFundMe. I didn't realize it was a babysitter pretending to be the mother of 3 kids. That's incredible. What a scam. Respect. That's incredible. Man, CNN, what a trash network. So Hammond says they cannot go after nursing home issues. Most Democrat governors is the same thing. I think that's a good analysis. That's why it's a lot easier to go after Cuomo for the sexual harassment stuff than it is for the nursing homes. Because they go after Cuomo, they have to go after basically every Democrat governor. And I don't think you would ever expect a political movement to commit seppuku in that way. I don't think that would really ever happen. Let's see. I'm not sure what this is in reference to. Somebody saying that it's hard to estimate how corrupt people will be, and that having jurors that were activists who lie to get on the jury is a hell of a curveball. That's very true. I mean, I think I've talked about this before when the Chauvin trial was ongoing, but there's some reasonable chance that they will prevail on appeal. I would bet against it because in general, criminal trials it's very hard to get a criminal verdict overturned. But this is one of those cases where it might actually happen. Let's see. What else is there? Somebody says, should have a discussion with Dave Smith about the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Matthew Cameron says how the libertarians would navigate this since the independent size has increased with polarization. That's an interesting point. I would love to have a conversation with Dave Smith at some point, because I know in particular, Dave Smith doesn't agree with me about making platform access a civil right. So we all have a right to use Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, et cetera. So I would absolutely love to have a conversation with Dave Smith. Odds of the Republicans winning back the House next year and Scalise replacing McCarthy. I would place the odds of Republicans winning back the House that next year pretty high, 75%. The odds of Scalise replacing McCarthy pretty low, more like 15 to 20%. Don't bet against the party kicking out McCarthy. The guy's a speaker for a reason. He's very competent. Like, think about how much progressives hate Nancy Pelosi and how yet she's the only choice. Like, even AOC voted for her. You know, people are reluctant to disturb things that dramatically. Michael Woods says that in the infrastructure bill support makes contrasting persuasion harder to do. Yeah, it's something like I saw that the Heritage had something similar, like a thesis that was along those lines. Yeah, this is it. And I'll try and zoom in on this so you guys can see what they said. But they made an argument that I thought was I wasn't that persuaded by. They said, quote, this is Heritage's white paper. By passing a bipartisan infrastructure bill, the prospects of successful passage of the reconciliation bill, which only requires a simple majority vote, increase drastically. Agreeing to this wasteful bill removes leverage for reconciliation negotiations and deducts more than $1 trillion in costs from the reconciliation bill, thereby making it easier to pass. And so I don't necessarily agree with that analysis, right? Like, if the argument is, well, we shouldn't agree to any spending because then all the spending Manchin wants will be in the reconciliation bill, Therefore, the reconciliation bill will have too high a price tag, and therefore people will be deterred from pushing it. I don't know. I don't think that's right. I think, again, the question is, how do we hold Manchin? How do we keep Manchin on side? I don't think Manchin really likes the AOC people. I think here's the other thing to understand about Manchin, right? Manchin is probably not happy with progressive Democrats, given how mean they've been to him. Like, one of the things that I don't know if you guys know about, in the last few months, I've watched a lot of MSNBC. Not happy about that fact. Not my favorite thing in the world to do, but my lovely fiance is a media reporter at the Daily Caller, and one of her jobs is to report on what Democrats are saying and what crazy stuff Joy Reid is saying, for example. And I think watching that, you would not have, if you do not watch that stuff, you had no idea how much modern Democrats hate Joe Manchin. They have contempt for him. They do not like him at all. And despite the fact that they would never get, they're never going to get anybody better than Joe Manchin in West Virginia ever again. That if we ever, the next senator to replace Joe Manchin will be a Republican, will be down the line Trump supporting nationalist. Despite that, Democrats still hate Joe Manchin with the fire of 1,000 suns. So, and they've made that clear, and they've insulted him repeatedly on major, news shows. Chris Hayes, Joy Reid, Cuomo, Don Lemon, et cetera. None of them like Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin doesn't like them either, but Joe Manchin's still a Democrat, so he feels some obligation to work with their party. But he doesn't do it all the time. And so I think, again, this is why McConnell's making that calculation. Like, people think of, Joe Manchin is not a Republican, doesn't go our way all the time, but he really doesn't like the squad either. And so we just got to give him something to work with, I think. Roman Candle says this is exactly right. Democrats probably feel about Manchin the way we feel about Kinzinger. Exactly right. We probably hate Kinzinger more just because he's so flagrantly, essentially disloyal in a way that Manchin at least has the credibility of being a moderate. Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, for example, are just straight up disloyal assholes. Why is Dave Smith not running for governor of New Hampshire instead of talking about running for president? I don't know. Puna, I have no idea. I'm not into internal, whatever Libertarian Party strategy. In general, I think the Libertarian Party is a LARP. It has no meaningful base. The Libertarians have had their most influence and their most success working within the Republican Party. The most obvious example of this is on foreign policy, where Ron Paul's thoughts from 15 years ago are now have dramatically changed the Republican Party's worldview. People like Liz Cheney, Bill Kristol Bill Kristol's not even a Republican anymore. Most of the people who advocated the Iraq War are not Republicans anymore, and the Republican Party has integrated the sort of libertarian critique of interventionist foreign policy into its platform. So I think that's where libertarians have their most success. You know, in some areas they've had less, right? They've lost a lot of ground on making the Republicans like a small government party. They've definitely, but that was never really that popular in the first place. The most popular aspects of the libertarian platform were always the anti-war stuff, and the Republican Party, and working within the Republican Party, people like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie have integrated that in. So I think that's probably a good thing. Michael Wood says that my argument about give people standing against big tech is the best idea. Yeah, I've talked about that before. That's called the private right of action. I'll quickly pull that up here. If you haven't read this article, you should. Platform access is a civil right, and here's how conservatives can protect it. And I think that's an article you can read on the subject that'll give you plenty of information whenever you want to. All right, I answered these few lingering questions, which are sort of unrelated to the topic, but I'm happy to do it since we're not at an hour yet. And I'm probably going to go to 50 minutes. My throat's starting to give, and I'm an hour, and I'm out of water. People underestimate talking for an hour straight is hard. It's challenging. Quote, thoughts on Austin slowly becoming the new Hollywood having? Is it one step closer to Texas flipping blue? If so, how soon? I don't think Texas, people have been saying Texas is going to flip blue for a long time. I don't think it is. I think, and the reason I say that is because whatever, immigration pressures there are from like liberals coming to Texas, there are just as many from conservatives coming into Texas. People forget that even though California is a deep blue state, it has more conservatives and Republican voters than anywhere else in the country. When you think about it, right? California's got 20 million people. Even if it's 60-40 blue, that's 8 million conservatives. And those people are leaving. Like I know so many of them. Like I'm a California native and I'm a conservative. My family is. They're talking about leaving. I have tons of friends who've already left for places like Texas, South Carolina, et cetera. And the conservatives are the outflow. So, that's people say Texas was going to flip, and it didn't. Texas is staying pretty stable at like a R+6, R+7 state, even with demographic changes, right? That people like Julian Castro were assuring everybody would lead to Texas voting blue. I don't think that's really, what's going to happen. So I think Texas is staying red. Armand says it's very amusing for me as a Dem to see that the GOP too has to wrestle with the chaos Muppet mansion. Yeah, no, that's kind of a good way of putting it. The chaos Muppet, I like it. It's totally true. He's just like in control of the Senate right now, and everybody sort of has to negotiate with him and deal with him. And I think in this respect, McConnell's being more sophisticated than AOC, who seems to AOC just wants to play hardball with a member of her own party who is in a red state and she has no leverage over. I think Democrats should be thankful every day that they have someone who'd even consider voting for their policies in a West Virginia Senate seat. They should be grateful every single day. Let's see. Robin DiAngelo looks like a 30 years younger Nancy Pelosi down to the mannerisms. Very true. Her book is also terrible, by the way. It's one of the most ridiculously racist books I've ever read. Okay, final comment I'm going to talk about before we hit the road. DeSantis should hire Ryan Gerdusky and Scott Presler if he wants to win the White House. That would be effective. I did want to say that DeSantis hired Christina Pushaw after she published at Human Events 2 articles defending DeSantis. So if you never check these out, these were a big deal. I'm very proud of the fact that we published these articles by Pushaw. She's now Ron DeSantis' communications director, and you should follow her on Twitter if you don't. So that's a good thing. All right. Anyway, that was the last comment. I've seen a few others. I want to say thank you guys for watching and supporting. Again, more people here than there were yesterday in terms of staying all the way through. I intend to continue to build this, right? It's a podcast. You just do it every day and build an audience. That's kind of the idea here. I hope you enjoyed the commentary. I hope you found it insightful, interesting. Even if you disagreed with me, I hope you saw the reason why. And I'm always happy to engage with the comments. And when you want to talk and do that, that's kind of what I want to integrate, especially in the sort of Q&A period towards the end. And so if you are here on Periscope, make sure to hit, so you get notifications in the live video. If you are on Facebook, hit that like button. And if you are on YouTube, and if you're not on YouTube, hit subscribe to the youtube.com/humanevents so you can, and hit the bell so you get notifications whenever we go live. And that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much. I will talk to you tomorrow.